that on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Reckless speculation. You want reckless speculation?
You know this ain't gonna happen.
How about reckless trade speculation?
For the love of God!
Yeah, we woke up in a speculative mood today here. We've, the Vikings, sort of the wave of the Seahawks loss has passed, and the Twin season is over. But now that the NBA season is over, we said, let's get into some Timberwolves discussion, Judd. Let's. There's nothing we like more than to speculate on things that could happen on this show. And Bobby Marks, who's been he's been a friend of this show, he's been a friend of our friend Doogie as part of the Score North podcast network, and he is an ESPN NBA front office insider. And with the Timberwolves among the teams at the center of the conversation moving into this NBA offseason, they possess the number 1 overall pick. They're in the hunt for a third star player. We would love, Bobby, to just pepper you with some Timberwolves stuff if you're down for it.
That sounds good. Let's go.
So you have, and we should direct people to ESPN.com. You have to be an insider, but Bobby essentially lays out for all of the teams in the NBA, all of their tradable assets, all of their valuable assets, players that likely will not be touchable in trades. And so I think my first question to you is, from a front office perspective, as the Timberwolves look to be relevant in the Western Conference again, what do you think is their best roster bolstering path? Is it to keep the number 1 pick and draft who they think is the best young player and put that player with D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns and hope that that player is the third star? Or is it to leverage that pick for an established player that could help maybe a little bit more immediately?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you can go out and get a third star, that is always the goal. The hard part is there's not many third stars available out there in a trade compared to the number 1 pick, and you have that player on a 4-year contract at a really low salary. I mean, look at what happened in Miami with Tyler Hero, right? I mean, you've got the 13th or 14th pick, and now you've got him locked up making $4 million a year, and he's a really good player. Is he a franchise player? No, but he is part of something. So, yeah, I think if you're Gerson Rosas, you are canvassing the league. It's kind of comparable to the year that Anthony Bennett went number 1. I don't want to say that the number 1 pick is going to be there. I just think there's so much uncertainty as far as who that number 1 pick is, because it could be LaMelo Ball, it could be James Wiseman, it could be Anthony Edwards. Like, we've got a wide net of players here. So, yeah, I think the first thing that – and the Timberwolves have probably been doing already is canvassing the league, finding what is the value of the number 1 pick. And then you kind of put that on your big whiteboard. And then when you head into, November 18th, that has your options there. But I mean, if you can find somebody as that third guy to pair with Karl and D'Angelo, I think that's probably the ultimate goal. But the trade part of it, the trades are hard. I mean, trades are really hard, and you're probably giving up more than the number 1 pick if you're going to get a third guy.
Give me, Bobby, what you see as the most plausible star-like player from a team that might be willing to make a deal and would be attracted to that Wolves top pick.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. I think probably at the end of the day, Victor Oladipo probably becomes available. Because I think – and it's just the math lines up. If he doesn't sign an extension, and they can only offer up to $112 million over 4 years, it's probably less than maybe what he can make when he's healthy. He goes into this upcoming year as on an expiring contract, and usually history tells you a star level guy on an expiring contract, right? Like you kind of have to take offers unless you're Toronto and Kawhi, right? Like that kind of that doesn't happen. So I think that's where you're looking at. That's the roll of the dice, right? So if you are going to sacrifice something really of good value, if it's number 1, if it's 17, if it's another player, to take back a guy on an expiring with the uncertainty that he's going to commit long term, that's a big risk compared to as far as going the safe bet for that player who's on a 3 or 4 year contract. But yeah, I mean, we haven't really gotten that disgruntled veteran who wants out yet. I mean, I think we're kind of in the beginning stages of that, and I'm not saying that's the Giannis's. I'm thinking, what happens in Washington with Bradley Beal, right? That's probably one guy. I don't think Devin Booker is probably obtainable right now because of the success they had. I mean, if they went to Orlando and went 0-8, I would probably say, yeah, like, where's this team going? But I think they're probably living off that really good stretch of games in Orlando and seeing where that team goes. But that's kind of the process that the Timberwolves are going to go through. Is you're almost going to sit back and let's see what happens in the next month if there is a disgruntled all-star that maybe has – the goal is to have length on the contract. Like the expiring route, you're playing Russian roulette with that. You really are, because then you have a year of recruiting that player, but when he leaves, it's a little more challenging. And I mentioned Kawhi earlier because like there was already a really good foundation in place. Like there was already a proven track record. And I know they moved DeMar, but you had Kyle there. Siakam was still developing. Fred has started to develop. You already had Ibaka. You went out and got, you had Gasol. So you just kind of added Kawhi to that mix. And it was worth it because if he left and you still had those guys in place, we're here, man, if you get a number 3 guy and he leaves, that sets you back a little bit.
Oladipo is an interesting one. I think that's the first time I've really heard his name pop up here. And I think because he's only played 55 games the last couple of years because of injuries. But when he came onto the scene and really broke out that first year with the Pacers, I think if we were talking about that version of Victor Oladipo with multiple years on the contract like he had in 2017-18, I would be very curious about trading that number 1 pick. He seems like a great buy low candidate and a get healthy candidate, but I don't know if I would personally trade the number 1 pick for him. Would I trade the other first round pick that the Wolves have and take a shot on Victor Oladipo? Maybe. I mean, what do you think of that? Like, could you get Victor Oladipo for a just outside the lottery first round pick?
Probably not. I think you probably could do that closer to the draft will be over, but I think if you get to the trade deadline and they need to move him, I think right now if you're Indiana and if your goal is to eventually move him down the road, is that you're kind of sitting in a holding pattern. You're waiting just for the best offer, and I don't think the 17th and the 33rd pick is the best offer. And where on the other end, I don't think the Timberwolves should trade number 1 for Victor Oladipo. I mean, as you mentioned, like I'm not convinced that Victor can return to that form we saw pre-injury. I'm just not, and that is that's a big ask as far as what you're going to have to potentially give up for that.
Outside of that pick, what do you see as the most attractive tradable contract on this team right now, too? So if you are a GM and you're scanning through rosters and salaries, what do you see, Bobby, as the most attractive tradable contract that the Wolves have?
Well, I think there's a couple. I mean, I think we take Karl and D'Angelo off the board. You've got the expiring of James' contract, and he'll pick up that player option. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, he probably already filed the paperwork. I mean, for that thing, so that will be exercised. And then you've got your younger kids. You've got your former lottery picks. With a Koji and who fell out of outside the lottery, but and Culver, right? Like those young value, as I mentioned earlier, with like the Tyler Heroes, those guys on those rookie scale contracts just have a lot of value because if they're really good players and they develop for you, the likelihood is that you have them for 7 or 8 years. The 4 years of the rookie, and then you have them as a restricted free agent. So those are the type of things that that would really have value. Outside of your 2 main guys there. Yeah.
How likely is it that Ben Simmons gets traded this offseason?
I don't know. I don't think it's likely. I think especially if I'm Doc Rivers, who's is taking over, I want to see if I can make that work. I don't think you can move Ben and or Embiid there. And I would, if I was Philadelphia, if you told me, hey, you can only keep 1, for me it would be keeping Simmons. I wouldn't keep. I would split. I'm more of a Simmons guy than I am probably more of an Embiid guy. So I don't think likely in the offseason. I think you're kind of in a wait and see mode. Both those guys. I mean, Joel's got 3 years left, and Ben's just starting that rookie extension, so he's got 5. So I think if you're Doc Rivers, you're going to want to wait and see what you have with that roster, and then if you get somewhere during the season or even next offseason, you say like this is not going to work, we're going to have to make a decision as far as where this goes. I think that's probably where Philadelphia would look.
Off that point, Give me one move that you think has a chance of happening that would actually surprise fans but wouldn't shock you.
Yeah, I mean, I have an article coming out on Thursday, and it's kind of like it started as the 10 big questions heading into the offseason. I added an 11th question. I think what probably wouldn't shock people, but they have never really gone through this process is that, as I said, my one team to watch is San Antonio, right? Like, San Antonio is a fascinating story because they missed the playoffs this year. They played really well in Orlando with all those young kids. I mean, they put like DeRozan at the 4, and they basically just said like Dejounte Murray, Derek White, Keldon Johnson. Let's see what we have here. And there's a foundation here, and they're at a crossroads with DeRozan's going to probably opt in. That's a big number to go out in free agency. He's going to opt in. You've got LaMarcus Aldridge on an expiring. You've got Patty Mills on an expiring. You've got Rudy Gay on an expiring. All right. So what are you going to do with those 4 kind of, at once core pieces here? So, but they've never really been in the market where they're just going to break it up. They've always tried to kind of stay in the game here. And are they a team that's going to kind of hit that retool button to look to see if they can get value for? So that was my my big team, I guess, to kind of keep an eye on.
Yeah. So you in your article that we're referencing here, just off the top of this discussion, where you lay out all the assets, you do have Bradley Beal on the off the table section in Washington. So your colleague at ESPN, Jay Williams, is a regular. He's a weekly guest on our show, and he's known Karl-Anthony Towns for a long time, and so we were kind of playing this game like, yeah, who are the potential guys that are established that could be the third star, and we got to Bradley Beal, and he was like, oh my God. If that would happen, like if you could have Bradley Beal and D'Angelo Russell and they could play any semblance of defense and shoot lights out, and you'd have Karl-Anthony Towns, he was just salivating over that potential. And I personally think like Bradley Beal at some point is in line for just a change of scenery, but you have him in the off limits category. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, I probably should have put an asterisk next to his name. I think he's different off limits compared to Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard. Like, those guys are not going anywhere, right? Anthony Davis, you could say that too. Like, they're not, like, if you wouldn't even call Sean Marks in Brooklyn, right? And see if like that's like the insult call. Like, where Bradley, he's off limits, I would say, for now, right? I think for right now, where Washington is, where John Wall coming back healthy, he should be off limits until we see how those two work together, how John Wall is healthy. Now, if you ask me on January 18th, let's say if the season starts and we get going here and it's like, what do you think of Bradley Beal? I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, he's probably like, I don't know if it can work with John Wall. Then that's a different conversation. But I think for right now, he's off the table. That doesn't mean 2 months from now or 3 months from now, we get the season started and the Wizards start 2-10, and he's like, what are we doing here? Like, I'm not going through this again. Now that's a different conversation. But he's a guy, like, as I said earlier, like, it'd be an insult to call, Rob Pelinka and say, hey, got any interest in moving LeBron? Like, you're not doing it, right? Like, you're not
shoot your shot, man. Gerson Rosas, if you're watching, if you're listening, shoot your shot, Gerson. Come on.
But it's not an insult if Gerson picked up the phone and called Tommy Shepard, their GM, and say, like, what are you going to be? What do you think about Bradley? Are you going to be doing, and Tommy would probably say, you know what, not right now. Maybe down the road, let's maybe revisit. But so that's so I probably should have maybe massaged that a little better and maybe put an asterisk next to it. But for now, I think I would certainly think Bradley's probably off the table.
Hey, what do you think the current perception of playing here with where the Wolves are at currently, Bobby, is? I mean, it's been a franchise that's, been through so much. And I'm sure at times guys have said, I wouldn't go and play for the Wolves if you paid me X. But with the direction that they're going and what Gerson is doing, what do you think the perception of this team is right now?
Well, I mean, I think the perception is that they've got a great front office. I've known Gerson forever, when he was in Houston. I've known Joe Branch forever when he was an agent, Rock Nation. And I've known Sachin for a long time, especially when he was in Philadelphia and we did a lot of deals. And they have, and it's hard when you walk into that and you're basically going to try. I mean, Gerson has turned that roster over. I mean, like there's like, I mean, Karl is like really the only guy I think left, and in the Western Conference too, to be able to do this. This is not the East. This is a hard feat. So it is a player-friendly, family-friendly organization. That is the start. It is an organization that they will spend if they need. You have a coach in Ryan, I think is a player-friendly coach here. But the hard part is like now you got to get some of these guys right now. I think there's a foundation in place. It's like, D'Angelo is the roof and Karl is the foundation. Now, like, all right, what are we going to do with the walls and the second floor? Right. Like, how do we keep on and going? And are they in worse shape than some other teams in the past? No, I think they're probably ahead of the game compared to teams like Detroit and some of the teams that were in the lottery here. I think as long as they have a plan in place and they're not going to deviate off it, like in Brooklyn, we deviated off the plan, as far as building with young players and going that route. And then you kind of just go from step 2 to step 9. Yeah, you get a little bit of a taste of success, and then you're back to step 1. I think that's the ultimate goal for them. But yeah, I mean, I think compared to where they were, maybe, I know Tibbs did really good things in that 1 year, but I think there's a strong foundation here where that Gerson's not going anywhere. Ryan's not going anywhere. And we'll see what happens with this ownership change. Even if there's with the change of ownership, it's hard for me to believe that someone would come in and be like, you know what, I'm going to wipe the slate clean and I want to bring in my own front office. And I think what gives Gerson an advantage that he went through it in Houston. When he went with it, when Fertitta took over. I mean, he's kind of gone through that where he can walk whoever that new owner is going to be kind of through this process.
Last thing for you.
Reckless speculation.
So I don't even know where this originated from. I don't know if it was just like Wolves bloggers speculating on different things, but let's just say you got the Hawks picking at 6.
Yeah.
And let's say the Timberwolves look at
I know where you're going here.
Yep. This is a fun angle. And the Wolves look at the top of the draft and they're like, all right, we like these players, but there's not like a franchise changing player. There's a bunch of good players.
Yeah.
So we're comfortable picking 6th if the Hawks want to trade up to 1, but we need something to go along with that. And John Collins is a restricted free agent after next year in Atlanta, and they have other pieces. But John Collins specifically piques my interest because he's a 20-10 power forward who shoots threes. That type of a deal, how realistic is it? How much of a player could Atlanta be, and how good is John Collins?
I would do that. I mean, shoot, I might even just give him 1 and give me John Collins. And you can keep 6.
Wow. But you'd have to get you probably have to be willing to match any sort of restricted free agent contract.
You'd have to get something probably else back, but I think he's a heck of a player. I really do. I mean, that's kind of, and then, that's different than a guy on an expiring because he's restricted and you have the right to match and you can get a deal done. And I think it'll be interesting what Atlanta does with him from an extension base because his cap hold is so low because of where he was picked, and they can hold off and then preserve flexibility for 2021. And how does he work with Capella, right? Like there's a lot of different dynamics to that here, but yeah, that's the type of thinking that you probably have to go into if you're looking for that third guy. Would be, taking 1, flipping it for 6. What else can you, probably something else from Minnesota comes back. But yeah, I mean, that's front office thinking right there. That's not reckless. That's not reckless.
It's
Look at that.
Reckless speculation.
And by the way, it is not my genius. It's like the Wolves blogosphere that I'm stealing here. So just to deflect credit, but Bobby Marks, we appreciate you coming on, man. I'm sure we'll probably hit you up in like a month. We don't know when free agency officially starts yet. We know the draft is in a month from now. And so we'd love to talk again in a month as we know more about what could happen here in mid-November.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome, man. Bobby Marks, ESPN insider, front office insider for their NBA coverage. And like that's the type of thing. Like John Collins is not a household name, but if they don't think there's a franchise-changing player at the top, if they think that all these guys are like, they're really good players, but there's not a LeBron or a Kevin Durant or another Karl-Anthony Towns, then could you get an established player, still have a pick in the top 6 by swapping, and now you've bolstered your roster even more? Or could you trade is it the 17th overall pick? There's the other first round pick.
Yeah,
Like, could you
that's
trade
right.
that for an established player and draft number 1 overall? There's a lot of different paths here. And of course, the cynics would say, yeah, a lot of different ways for them to screw it up again. Like they always do. But this is a smart front office.
I can't blame them. The cynics you cannot blame at this point in time.
That was like 20 minutes of
That
just
was
straight
great.
reckless speculation right there.